and another First in the Nation primary is behind us. While the nation itself has moved on, here in the Granite State, folks are already tidying up after the big parties, and political types are already starting to think about the next go-round here in 2028. Here to discuss the present and the future of New Hampshire's tradition are two gentlemen who've been in the trenches with these campaigns before, Mike Dennehy and Mike Vlasic. Thanks so much for being here, guys. We appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thanks, Adam.
So let's start with some big picture impressions. Mike Dennehy, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts about how this primary turned out?
Well, I'd say it was a win for New Hampshire overall. Certainly, you have to look at the numbers and record turnout. As I mentioned the numbers, you have to mention Dave Scanlon. I mean, I've always been amazed at how well Bill Gardner in the past, and this year, Dave Scanlon, off by 1,000 votes and predicting the Republican turnout. Amazing. But I do think overall it was a win for New Hampshire, win for the Republican Party, and I think it sets 2028 up nicely for the next presidential race.
Oh, what about you, Mike?
I thought New Hampshire once again established itself as the most important primary state in the nation, and it defied the odds on that. And quite frankly, sent a good message to Washington that we take our job seriously as in doing our civic duty. So really want to thank all the election officials, the people in the towns that were counting the votes who did an amazing job. And quite frankly, both parties did an exceptional job. On the Democratic side, President Biden received the largest number of votes for a Democratic president in the New Hampshire primary history. It's remarkable, but that's because we have awesome voters.
Yeah, and on a write-in, no less. Before we dig in more on the future side of things, let's talk about the race itself. Mike, what kept Nikki Haley from going from hot candidate to a true Granite State phenomenon here?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Adam, three things in my opinion. First was her shift in strategy the last week of the campaign, where she essentially closed herself off to voters. She had had success with town hall meetings all through the campaign. She stopped doing them in the last week of the campaign. The largest message I think that she sent was on her way from Iowa to New Hampshire, saying she's going to skip the debates. A tremendous unforced error by not participating in the debates, allowing yourself the opportunity to speak to millions of voters across the country, but most important, voters here in New Hampshire. WMUR is the place to be. And she essentially said, I'm not having it. And then the final thing is local media. She wouldn't answer a reporter's call. She wouldn't talk to local reporters in the last week of the campaign. You have to truly be open to all voters, using all available resources to connect with these voters in the final week. So she couldn't connect directly one-on-one with the undecided independent voters, let alone registered Republican voters, which was a challenge from the start because Trump is so strong. But I just think it was a terrible, terrible last week of the campaign. And that's why she lost by 10 points, 11 points.
Yeah, it's remarkable how much the voter here wants to see the candidates, not just in person, but also in their local TV station, their local paper. You know, you got to be in the Milford cabinet, right? If that's still around these days.
Well,
you know, they want to see you, you know, act at a local level.
That's right.
But Mike Vlasic, the write-in effort, truly remarkable what the Biden folks were able to achieve there. Democrats really had to swallow hard here any anger they might have had about First in the Nation status and send this dual message of both loyalty and relevance. How did that strategy take shape, do you think, and why did it work so well?
Well, I'm very proud of all the people that put in a lot of time into that write-in, and they should be very proud of themselves. But they did it for one reason and one reason only, because they believe in what our mission is here in New Hampshire, and that is to promote democracy. And quite frankly, they were driven certainly by support for the president. As I mentioned, he had a record percentage of the vote and record number of votes, especially as a write-in, but they also cared about the issues and what's at stake, and they were able to set aside some differences here in terms of the party politics of it, because what is at stake to them, and quite frankly in their case, in the Democratic case, the threat of the MAGA agenda was more important to them, and stopping that. The assault on reproductive rights was a big driving issue for them, the concern around the potential for a national abortion ban. Those issues matter a lot to a lot of voters. As a matter of fact, in the Republican primary, exit polls suggest that 60 to 70% of the voters in the Republican primary oppose a national abortion ban. So there are a lot of big issues that sort of transcend this and motivate people to go vote. And New Hampshire did its job.
When we talk about the future of the primary, you know, the idea that this became a one-on-one race in the last week in New Hampshire here, how crucial was that to giving some rocket fuel to the Democratic primary? The fact that the national media was here and they kind of ran out of people to cover, and they ended up having to talk to, you know, Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson a little bit more than they expected. That's probably something the DNC didn't like when they saw it.
No, I agree, it probably wasn't. You know, one thing I do think is important to note is that the Trump campaign was a juggernaut. And I think that's kind of getting lost in the story. They were never taken off their strategy throughout this entire campaign. They had the best organization of any of their prior campaigns. They had an army of volunteers working across the state. You know, I think in all of this post-mortem, I think it's important to note that the Trump campaign was firing on all cylinders at all times. But when it comes to the issues, I think it's also important to note that the two most important issues facing voters in this primary were immigration and the border and the economy. 70% of voters, those the top two issues. That's what people are going to be focused on in November. It's not going to be abortion. It's not going to be education. It's going to be immigration and the border and the economy and jobs.
And on the economy, there's an enthusiasm for the Democrats. In 1 week, you have seen, again, decreased inflation, record job growth, and record economic productivity. This is a very compelling story to tell, and the president, you know, can lay claim to this. And so Democrats are energized. The numbers showed that. And I'm, you know, if I'm a Democrat, as I am looking out at the election, I also see that there's a lot of independent vote, and in New Hampshire, independents matter the most. So I'm encouraged, if I'm the Biden campaign, looking out at the general election, at what is out there and available for them in the independent vote that went for Nikki Haley and Joe Biden.
We'll see which narrative really drives people to the polls in November. But in terms of the future of the primary, the national parties are watching this. When they see that New Hampshire stands up for itself, even on the Republican side, Mike Dennehy, are they taking note and saying, gosh, if we try this, it's just going to backfire?
I think so, because I think you also have to look at the success it had. And the narratives were perfect for the Republican Party, and the turnout was phenomenal for the Republican Party. So in all, I think the Republican National Committee looks at it as a success, and certainly Donald Trump looks at it as a success. And he has been a big supporter of the New Hampshire Republican primary. So I really feel pretty strongly about the support for New Hampshire's First in the Nation primary going forward. And I think we'll start seeing candidates in about 12 months. Adam, you'll be sitting here with a candidate potentially.
I completely agree with Mike. I think you saw it start already. 28, there were some nice sort of signals of what was going to come. I saw and was part of an amazing New Hampshire Democratic Party dinner where we had, you know, perhaps the next Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, there. And people are excited about who we have on the ballot this cycle, and I think they're very excited about the future. And what's nice about New Hampshire is we did provide a nice platform for the incumbent candidates, if you will. Nowhere else would Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, even Nikki Haley's gotten a better amount of attention here than in her home state. So New Hampshire did a great job.
Do you think, though, Mike, that the DNC will just give up? Obviously, you had some people on that Rules and Bylaws Committee who were saying we need to start enforcing, you know, the penalties for candidates that they designed, saying you can't go to this state.
I have lived a long time now, and I have lived through many iterations of this. New Hampshire always prevails.
To that end, you already noted, you know, you think we see the signs of a kind of epic 2028 happening here. If Biden and Trump are off the stage, are we going to see this dam break and just a generational number of candidates, because there are so many generations waiting in the wings to try and lead now?
I think 2016 was probably the largest field we've seen. I think it'll be bigger than that. How many surrogates did we see in here for Donald Trump in this final week? We could be looking at good, solid, talented 20 candidates for the Republican Party in 2028, let alone what will happen on the Democratic side. I think it's going to be amazing.
Right. It's a wide open field. New Hampshire offers a level playing field. It does not pretend or claim that it's going to pick the winner, although This time we did, and we did a good job. But I think we offer a level playing field, and that is all people can ask for, and it does a good job of it.
And you know, I want to add too, Ron DeSantis, whose campaign obviously fell apart, toward the end of his campaign, he actually said, I wish I had started earlier doing more of the traditional style New Hampshire campaigning. That speaks volumes for the New Hampshire Republican primary, a testament to the primary and to Ron DeSantis, who knows he could have done things better and had a better result potentially.
Do you wonder, both of you, as practitioners, you know, we had Scott Walker in 16, Kamala Harris in 2020, who kind of whiffed on an opportunity here, and Ron DeSantis as well. Obviously, he had an Iowa strategy, but clearly left a lot of support on the table in New Hampshire. Are we going to keep seeing this where sort of a leading candidate just looks at the map and is like, I don't need to do that one?
Well, I think, yes. I think the bottom line
they're always
is
going to
yes.
be there. Yeah.
Exactly right. But the question, and I guess going forward, is how candidates do both. How they have a strong Iowa, strong New Hampshire, and be competitive in both states. And obviously, that's worked for many candidates.
And what makes us unique, and what I think it's at anybody's peril to skip New Hampshire, we're one of the only early states that's a battleground state. It is a twofer. It's a great investment to do your campaigning in New Hampshire. Even if you think you're going to lose, build those relationships, set the framework for what's going to happen in November.
Good point.
All right, Mike and Mike in the morning. We'll have to do this again. We appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.